There is something about farmhouses that unsettles people in a way that other buildings do not. It is not just the isolation, though the isolation is part of it. It is the age of the walls, the history that is soaked into the wood and the stone over generations. The fact that farmhouses exist at the edge of things, at the boundary between the ordered world of the living and whatever lies beyond the tree line, beyond the dark fields, beyond the reach of any light you did not bring yourself. People have always known this. There is a reason that when folklore reaches for a setting that feels genuinely dangerous, it does not choose a city apartment or a suburban house. It chooses the farmhouse at the end of the dirt road, the one you can see from the highway but can never quite find when you are looking for it. The 4 stories in this video come from real people. They were submitted to paranormal forums, shared in late-night threads, and told by individuals who, in most cases, had never spoken about what happened to anyone outside their immediate families. Some of them still have not fully explained what they experienced. Some of them have simply stopped trying. These are their accounts. The first story comes from a woman named Claire, who was 26 years old when it happened and is now in her late 30s. She has given permission for her story to be shared, with certain details changed to protect her location and identity. She tells it the same way every time, which is the detail about her account that the people who have heard it find most unsettling. Not the events themselves, but the consistency. The way she does not embellish or waver. The way she simply describes what happened in order, as though she is reading from something she wrote down the night it occurred. Because she was. Claire had taken a house-sitting job through a family connection. A couple she knew distantly through her parents owned a farmhouse about 2 hours outside the city, set back from a county road on roughly 40 acres of mixed farmland and woodland. They were going abroad for 6 weeks. They needed someone to water the plants, collect the mail, and make sure the property did not sit entirely empty. Claire was between jobs, and the arrangement included a modest payment and free accommodation. She said yes. The farmhouse was old, built in the early 1900s, renovated patchily over the decades, with low ceilings and narrow hallways, and the particular smell of a building that has absorbed a century of weather. The couple showed her around on a Saturday afternoon before they left for their flight. Everything was straightforward. The boiler ran warm. The back door stuck. The nearest town was 20 minutes by car. The first 2 weeks were uneventful. Claire settled into a routine. She worked remotely, cooked her own meals, walked the perimeter of the property in the evenings. She described it as peaceful in a way that city life had not prepared her for. Deep quiet. The kind where you can hear your own pulse. The knock-in started on a Wednesday night in the 3rd week. She was in bed, not yet asleep, reading. The farmhouse had gone through its usual evening sounds, the settling of the structure, the distant noise of wind through the trees, the occasional movement of the old boiler. These were familiar by now. This was not familiar. It came from inside the wall behind her headboard. 3 knocks, deliberate, evenly spaced, like someone making a point of being heard. She sat up. She told herself it was a pipe. She told herself it was an animal. The house was old. Old houses make noise. She got up, pressed her ear to the plaster, heard nothing, went back to bed, lay in the dark for a long time, nothing more. In the morning, she half convinced herself she had been half asleep. The following night, it came again, same wall, same 3 knocks. But this time, it was earlier. She was fully awake, and there was no ambiguity about what she was hearing. She knocked back once on impulse, the way you might if you thought it was a neighbor through a shared wall in an apartment building. She did not think about why she did this until later. The wall knocked back 3 times, her exact rhythm. Claire got out of bed and left the room and did not go back into it that night. She slept on the couch with every light in the ground floor on and her phone in her hand. She did not call anyone. She told us later that she could not find language for what had happened that would not make her sound unwell. Over the following days, she investigated methodically. She contacted a plumber in the nearby town who came out and inspected the pipe system. Nothing that could explain rhythmic knocking. She walked the outside perimeter of the house and examined the exterior wall at the relevant point. No access points, no evidence of nesting animals. Solid stone beneath the plaster, the plumber confirmed, with standard cavity insulation. No hollow spaces where an animal could travel and produce that kind of sound. The knocking moved. This is the part of Claire's account that she delivers most carefully, as though she is aware of how it sounds and wants to be precise. Over the next several nights, the knocking appeared in different walls. The hallway outside her room, the kitchen, once, briefly, in the ceiling of the sitting room, directly above where she was standing. It did not happen every night, but when it happened, it always came in 3s. And on 2 more occasions, when she knocked back, it responded. She left on a Thursday morning, 4 days before the couple was due to return. She sent them a message explaining she'd had a family emergency. She drove the 2 hours back to the city without stopping. She did not tell them what had actually happened until almost a year later, when she had enough distance to say it plainly. When she told them, there was a silence on the other end of the phone. Then the woman said, "That has happened to other people too." She did not elaborate. Claire did not ask her to. The second story involves a family, a husband and wife, both in their early 30s, and their daughter, who was 4 years old at the time. The father, who goes by the name Thomas in the original account, posted the story in sections over the course of several weeks, updating as events developed. The thread ran to hundreds of comments. He has not posted since the final update, which was brief and which we will come to at the end of his account. Thomas and his wife had inherited the farmhouse from his grandfather, who had lived there alone for the last 2 decades of his life. The inheritance was unexpected. They had not been particularly close to the grandfather. They knew the property existed, but had only visited twice, both times briefly. When the estate cleared, the farmhouse came to them, along with about 15 acres of land that included a large barn, a smaller outbuilding, and a stretch of tree line along the northern edge of the property. They decided to move in. The city had become expensive. The house needed work, but it was theirs. Thomas worked remotely. His wife had flexible employment. Their daughter, a quiet and observant child they describe consistently as unusually perceptive, had just turned 4. They moved in September. The barn stood about 60 meters from the main house. Large, old, built of the same stone as the farmhouse itself. Thomas's grandfather had not used it as a working barn for many years. It held equipment, stored furniture, smelled of old wood, and something else underneath that Thomas could not name. He cleaned it out over the first few weeks, got it to a state of reasonable order, and largely left it alone. In October, his daughter began talking about the man in the barn. Children say things. Children have imaginations that move faster and stranger than adult logic, and experienced parents develop a calibrated ear for what to follow up on and what to let pass. Thomas and his wife let it pass the first time. Their daughter mentioned at dinner that the man in the barn had been watching from the door again. They asked her what she meant. She described him briefly. Tall, standing very still. She said he did not come out of the barn. He just stood at the door and looked toward the house. Thomas checked the barn. Nothing. Over the following 2 weeks, she mentioned the man 4 more times. Always at night. Always in the barn doorway. Thomas began paying closer attention to the descriptions, partly to reassure himself they were inconsistent, the way a child's invented story tends to shift and change. They were not inconsistent. The descriptions were the same each time. Tall, still, standing at the door, not moving, just watching. On a Friday night in late October, Thomas set up a wildlife camera pointing at the barn. The kind used for tracking deer, motion activated, infrared capable. He positioned it from an upstairs window to cover the barn door and the ground between the barn and the house. He told his wife what he had done. He did not tell his daughter. He checked the footage on Sunday morning while his wife took their daughter to the nearby town for groceries. The camera had activated 11 times across Friday and Saturday night. 8 activations were animals: a fox, a cat, birds at dawn. 3 activations were between 11 at night and 2 in the morning on Saturday. Thomas described watching the footage in his post and then not posting anything further for 4 days. When he returned to the thread, he said the following: "The 3 nighttime activations showed the barn door open. In 2 of the clips, the doorway was empty and the door simply stood open in the dark, which was notable because Thomas was certain he had closed and latched it. In the 3rd clip, which was the 2nd activation chronologically, something was visible in the doorway. He described it as a shape. Tall, still, present for the full duration of the clip before the camera reset. He said he could not tell from the footage what it was. He said the quality was not clear enough for certainty. He said he had shown the footage to no one except his wife. His wife's response, he wrote, was to go very quiet and then ask him how soon they could arrange to stay somewhere else for a while. They left the following Tuesday. Thomas's final update said only that they were staying with family, that he had contacted a property specialist he did not name, and that he was not planning to return to the farmhouse in the immediate future. He thanked the people in the thread who had engaged seriously with the account. He has not posted since. The 3rd story is shorter than the others, and in some ways that makes it worse. A man named Paul was in his mid-40s when this happened, and he had been using a family farmhouse in a rural northern region as a writing retreat for several years. The property had belonged to his parents, and he had grown up visiting it as a child. He knew it well. He was comfortable there. He went alone regularly and had never experienced anything that troubled him. He arrived in January during a period of heavy snowfall. The plan was a week of uninterrupted work. The roads were passable when he arrived, but the forecast suggested they would close within a day or two. He was prepared for this. He had done it before. He stocked up, settled in, and spent the first day in reasonable contentment. On the second morning, he looked out the kitchen window at the snow-covered yard and noticed the footprints. They came from the tree line, roughly 100 meters from the house, and crossed the open yard in a direct line toward the back door. The stride was long. The prints were deep. Whatever had made them had been moving with purpose and had not slowed as it approached the house. The print stopped at the back door. Paul stood at the window for a long time. He told himself it was a walker, someone who had cut across the property in the night and come to the door for some reason. Perhaps shelter, perhaps lost in the storm. He told himself there was a simple explanation. Then he looked for the returning prints and found that there were none. The snow had been falling steadily since before his arrival and had paused for a window of several hours in the night, which was when the prints must have been made. The surface was clean and undisturbed beyond the line of approaching footprints. Whatever had walked from the tree line to his back door had not walked back. Paul checked the door. Locked. He checked the front door. Locked. He walked through the entire farmhouse and checked every window. He checked the barn. He checked the small outhouse. He walked the full perimeter of the building in the snow, examining the ground as he went. There were no other prints, no prints leaving, no prints around the sides of the house. Only the line coming in from the tree line, crossing the yard, ending at the back door. He posted the account some months later. He said he spent the remaining 5 days of the retreat without sleeping more than a few hours at a time. He said he never heard anything inside the house. Nothing moved or knocked or appeared. The rest of the week was silent. He said that in some ways that was the worst part, that nothing happened, that whatever the prints meant, he never found out, that the question just stayed open, the way certain questions do, sitting at the edge of everything, impossible to resolve, impossible to put down. He said he has not been back to the farmhouse since. He said he does not expect he will go back. He said the thing that stays with him, and the image that comes to him in the half-dark before sleep, is not the prints themselves. It is the way they stopped, clean, final, right at the door, as though whatever made them had simply ceased to need feet. The fourth and final story comes from a woman named Rachel, who documented the account over several months alongside photographs, which she shared selectively with people in the community who had followed the story from its beginning. The photographs have been described by those who saw them as deeply unsettling. Rachel has since made the account private, but her story circulated widely enough that it has been retold and verified across multiple forums. Rachel and her husband bought the farmhouse as a restoration project. They were experienced renovators. They had done this before with older properties, and they approached the farmhouse methodically and with genuine enthusiasm. It was a substantial building, several hundred years old in its original core, with additions built across multiple generations. They knew going in that there would be surprises. Old buildings always have surprises. They did not anticipate this kind of surprise. The discovery began in the east wing of the farmhouse, which had been closed off and unused for what appeared to be several decades. When Rachel and her husband began opening it up, they found it in the state typical of long-term closure. Dust, decay, the particular sadness of rooms that have not held warmth in a long time. They worked through it systematically over several weekends. In the third weekend, they found the wall. It was in a room at the far end of the wing that appeared from the original floor plans they had obtained from the county records office, not to exist. The plan showed that room as exterior wall, but the room was there, clearly interior, clearly part of the structure, simply not on any document they had been given. Behind a section of paneling that had been papered over and painted at least twice, they found a door. Rachel described the door as small, shorter than a standard door height, as was common in certain very old structures. Plain wood, old iron handle, locked. It took them an afternoon to get it open without damaging the frame, and when it opened, it revealed a room roughly the size of a large wardrobe, perhaps slightly wider. The room was not empty. There was a chair, a small table, a shelf on one wall, and on the shelf and on the table, and arranged on the floor with a care that was immediately apparent, even in the dim light of their flashlight, were objects, dozens of them, personal objects, a child's shoe, several photographs, old, formal, the kind taken in studios in the early 20th century, handwritten letters tied with string, a ceramic cup, what appeared to be a lock of hair wrapped in cloth, a wooden carving of an animal, worn smooth with handling. Rachel said the room did not smell the way the rest of the closed wing smelled. The rest of the wing smelled of genuine abandonment, of decades of stillness. This room smelled different. She described it and chose the word carefully as recent. She said it smelled like a room that someone had been in not very long ago. She said she and her husband stood at the threshold for a long time without going in. She said they have since had the objects examined by a local historian who confirmed that most of them dated to the early part of the 20th century and likely belonged to a single family. The letters were in a language neither Rachel nor her husband spoke. The photographs showed people whose identities they have never been able to establish. The historian had no explanation for the smell. Rachel's account ends with a detail she added almost as an afterthought at the end of her final post, the way people sometimes bury the thing they most want to say. She said that after they found the room, she began noticing that objects in the main part of the farmhouse were occasionally not where she had left them. Small things, a cup, a book, keys, nothing dramatic, nothing that could not be explained by simple forgetfulness, except that it happened to her husband too, independently, with objects the other had not touched. She said they had not yet decided what to do about the farmhouse. She said they were still living there. She said they had closed the door to the hidden room and had not opened it again. She said she did not know what she believed about what they had found or what it meant. or whether the room and the displaced objects were connected in any way that could be named. She said the thing she found hardest to dismiss was the smell. She said she kept going back to the smell. There is no clean ending to any of these 4 accounts. No resolution, no explanation, no moment where the rational world reasserted itself and everything made sense. The knocking in the walls answered and then stopped, and the house stood empty and unremarkable when the couple returned. The man in the barn was captured as a shape on a night vision camera, and then the family left and nobody went back to check. The footprints in the snow led to a locked door in the middle of a winter storm, and whatever made them simply was not there when morning came. The hidden room smelled like someone had recently left it, and the objects on the shelves dated to a century ago, and the smell had no explanation that satisfied anyone who encountered it. What these stories share is not a resolution. What they share is a particular quality of wrongness, the kind that does not announce itself loudly or arrive with theatrics, the kind that settles quietly into a corner of your understanding and stays there, the kind that farmhouses have always been good at keeping. If you are still watching and you want to go further into the dark, the next video on screen collects 5 more true accounts from people who moved into old rural properties and did not find them empty. Subscribe so you do not miss what comes next.